Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DocuMinded podcast. Before we start today's episode, I want to give a quick trigger warning to everybody listening. Now, I know I don't normally do this. If you've listened to my previous episodes, I've never given a trigger warning before. But this episode is going to discuss a lot of very heavy topics, including not just sexual assault, but the sexual assault of minors. It also discusses heavy topics of bullying. So if that is something that is uncomfortable for you, I completely respect your decision to step away and join us again on a later episode. But for those of you that are sticking around, this is the DocuMinded podcast, and today we are discussing Audrie and Daisy. Audrie and Daisy is a 2016 documentary that mainly focuses on the two girls in the title. But what it leaves out is the plethora of other girls that are also mentioned. And so I kind of want to talk about everybody involved. But first, we're going to start with Audrie Pott. Audrie Pott was a 15-year-old girl who went to a high school party. That's all she did. She went to a high school party, got a little drunk, and when she woke up, she had been drawn on in vulgar language. There were photos taken of her, and while she was unconscious, she had been sexually assaulted. What followed is an insane situation. The two boys that assaulted her, John R. and John M., took photos during the assault and spread them around. Within 8 days of her assault, she felt like her life was over. Her reputation was completely ruined, and there was nothing that she could do to fix it. And sadly, because of those reasons, she decided to end her life. There was no way to save her when her family finally found her. But what they did do is make sure that the boys didn't get away with what they did. If you watch the entire documentary start to finish, you don't find this out right at the beginning, but you find out at the end why the two boys, John M. and John R., are interviewed in the documentary. Audrie Pott's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the boys, stating that their torment of her and their sexual assault, them sexually assaulting her, is what led to her ending her life, which is true. So because of that, the boys were required to make a formal public apology that can be found online. They were also required to each individually do 45-minute interviews for this documentary. Even though they were required to be interviewed for this documentary as part of the settlement for the lawsuit, you don't find out exactly who they are. Now, I'm sure now you could go online and probably find their real names and their real identities, but at the time this happened, they were minors, and because of that, and because of the fact that the crime that they committed is not something that they could be tried for as an adult, or at least it wasn't seen that way, their identities were hidden and protected. So that's why you only know them by their first name, last initial. When they are shown in the documentary, whether that's as part of their interview, videos from their interrogation, or deposition, those videos are animated to also help hide the boy's identity. In any other case, I think I would highly disagree with hiding the perpetrator's identity. But considering they were underage, I understand that doing that was their way of getting justice while still following the law. And so I respect that decision to kind of, I don't want to say protect them, because they're adults now. And like I said, with the internet and everything, I'm sure you could easily find out who they are. But they were minors at the time, and at the end of the day, we have laws that protect minors no matter what they do. And this is one of those icky cases of that. It's a gray area, and I know a lot of people are very divided about whether or not their identity should be protected considering what they did. And honestly, I think I watched this documentary when I was about 8 years younger than I am now, maybe. And at the time I was like, why are they protecting these boys? This is stupid. But I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that watching the deposition and the interrogation, while they knew that the sexual assault part of it was bad, they didn't realize that literally every part of what they did from start to finish was what got them into this mess in the first place, and what ultimately ended up causing them to be held accountable for Audrie Potts' death. You find out in kind of the middle of the documentary, after you hear about Audrie's story, you hear about Delaney Henderson. But you don't really find out much about her until later in the documentary, so we're going to skip her story for now and move on to the second name in the title of this documentary, which is Daisy Coleman. So, Daisy Coleman had a seemingly perfect upbringing until about the age of 9, when her father passed away in a black ice-related car accident, which, knowing the area that everything took place, which is in a very, I can't think of the right word, but very country roads, that's how I'm going to word it, area of Missouri, it's understandable as to why that could be more of a possibility. I mean, it happens in the city here even. Like, people get in really bad car accidents and die from slipping on black ice all the time here in Missouri, and I know in other places as well. And so this was in Albany, Missouri. And after that, they decided to move to Maryville, Missouri, which is part of Nottoway County. And that's going to come in later. So Audrie's story is a little bit different Daisy's story is a little bit different from Audrie's. I can't remember if I said that the right way or not, so I just repeated it. She had her friend Paige over. They'd been friends for a really long time. They were drinking a little bit. They were 14. And I didn't do this at 14, but that's not to say that other 14-year-olds that I knew weren't doing this. I mean, I was kind of just a very uninterested in, like, the party and alcohol fueled teen year thing. That wasn't something I was interested in or that seemed cool to me. And so I just didn't participate. But it is very common for teenagers to, try smoking weed or try drinking alcohol at a young age. It makes them feel grown up and all this other stuff. And so her and her friend were in her bedroom, and she gets a text from a man named Matthew Barnett, who is not necessarily a friend, but somebody on the wrestling team with her older brother. Now, yes, she's 14. He, I believe, was 17 or 18 at the time. And you see the text messages, which he later denies and says it was all her that did it. But he texts her and is like, hey, there's some guys over at my house. You want to come over and have some drinks and hang out? She's 14. They're both 14. They're like, oh my gosh, this older guy is interested in us and wants to hang out with us. We should go. Like, this is so cool. This older guy wants us around. So they go, and there's more drinking involved. Paige ends up getting taken to one of the bedrooms in this basement by one of the younger boys that was there and is sexually assaulted. Her case is a lot more cut and dry than Daisy's in the sense that he took full accountability when he was called out for sexual assault. He took full accountability for his actions. He said he knew that what he did was wrong and he felt guilty about it, and ended up, serving his time. I can't remember how that was decided or all that. The difference between Paige's case and Daisy's case is that the two boys, Matthew Barnett, and I cannot remember the name of the other boy right now, but the two that were involved in Daisy's assault basically blamed her, denied everything. They said, oh, well, she was drunk when she got there. She was the one that wanted to drink. She was the one that wanted to do all of this stuff. But here's the thing. Her blood alcohol content was almost deadly. And when she was taken to the room and sexually assaulted, other people, other witnesses mentioned that she was not with it. She was unconscious. And when he brought her out after the assault, she was still unconscious. So the boys decide to put Paige and Daisy in their car and take them home. Daisy's still out of it. Paige is like, what should we do? How do we get her inside? How do we sneak her back in? And the boys are like, we'll take care of Daisy. You just go inside. So Paige, having I guess not the understanding to probably not believe them because she was in shock and she had just been through something terrible, does what they say and she goes inside. Well, that morning, Daisy's mom hears some noise outside or sees something out in the lawn or something like that. And when she goes outside, she finds her daughter, Daisy, basically frozen to the ground. She had basically been dumped out on the lawn in front of her house by these boys and kind of left to die. Thankfully, she ended up surviving. But this is where it gets tricky. So because of where Daisy Coleman's family lived, they were right on Maryville city line. So because they were on the city line, they were told to go and call the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office instead of calling the police department. So I think that's the first issue. This sheriff has a lot of problems, and I'm going to kind of call him a hypocrite from the jump, because you learn very early on he has two young middle school to high school age daughters of his own. And I believe if this situation, either Paige's situation or Daisy's situation, had happened to either one of his daughters, he would have a very different outlook on it. But because it wasn't his kids and it was, just some other kid, he didn't care as much. And of course that's a personal opinion. Take that as you wish. But they do a rape kit at the hospital. They take her clothes. They start talking to the boys that were there. And the boys are telling the story of, oh, she wanted to have sex. She wanted to be drinking. And I think as a 17-year-old, almost man, literally almost man, to say, oh yeah, this 14-year-old wanted to have sex and you're not mature enough to understand that that's not okay, you are the problem. And so Matthew Barnett and one other boy ends up getting arrested for Daisy's assault. Then, because there's supposedly not enough evidence for a sexual assault trial, the boys are let go. After the detectives and the sheriff's office, the sheriff's department, telling Daisy's mom that everything was getting handled and the boys would get proper justice served and all this stuff, literally later that day, the boys end up getting released and get to go home. This is where the story really blows up. If you're unfamiliar with this kind of group on social media, I don't know if they're still around or not. I know that they were really big at the time that this case happened in the early to mid 2010s. There's a group called Anonymous, and if they feel like there's an injustice going on, they're going to voice their opinion and call out the need to fix the problem. And so Anonymous makes a video basically telling the world about Daisy Coleman's story and how these boys got no repercussions for their actions, and it shines this giant light on Maryville. And the mayor even mentions, like, I think for him, you know, he talks about how all these families know each other. They grew up in this area. They're, you know, a tight-knit community because it's such a small community, and all of this good stuff happens in Maryville. They have, like, one of the top 100 fishing locations. They have a really big golf community that's quite popular and all this stuff. And he's like, the news never came out for that, but they'll come out for this. And I think that kind of just shows a small town misunderstanding. I don't think it's anything necessarily evil or malicious on his part. I think he just loves the place that he has grown up in and doesn't understand that that's just not how things work. The news is there to call out injustices and call out wrongdoings. And so they're doing their job by being there when this case is going on. And so it ends up shining a giant light. There's people coming out to look at it. So then I believe it was like a DA or assistant DA, something like that. I can't remember. For like in Kansas City, looks over the case. And while sadly there still does not seem to be enough evidence for a sexual assault trial, they can be charged with endangering the welfare of minors. So that's what they're charged for. They serve their time. I think they said it was like 3 or 6 months, but they served it on weekends, still got to go to school, still got to be part of sports, still got to live their lives perfectly normal. And because there was no sexual assault hearing, and no sexual assault charges were filed, Nottoway County and Maryville basically decided, oh, Daisy lied about everything. And I think if you're going to look at a 14-year-old who's clearly been through some shit and say, oh, she's lying about being sexually assaulted by a 17-year-old boy who should have known better, you're the problem. Like, there's no easy way to put that. There's no, like, nice way to put that. You're just a bitch. So, like, just shut up. I'm trying to keep my emotions out of this as best as I can, but this case heavily infuriates me. And we'll talk more about where a lot of my fury comes from with this case in a minute. But because of that, Daisy and her family, they're getting harassed at school. They're getting harassed at the grocery store. Their house is getting vandalized. It actually ended up getting to the point where their house caught fire and burned down. And so they ended up moving back to Albany because they still had their family home there and leaving Maryville. This is where Delaney Henderson kind of comes back into the picture. She gets this group together of girls who in their teens were sexually assaulted and never got proper justice, and decides that they're going to basically go to the government and try and get these laws changed and these laws fixed. And it doesn't touch on that too much, but it does show this circle of young girls getting together, talking about these terrible experiences that they've been through. And it just shows how strong women are. It really does. It shows what the right type of woman is. Someone that sees an injustice, calls it out, whether they've experienced it or not, and then gets people together that have been victimized so that people who have been victimized feel less alone. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I really, really do. And I give her a lot of praise for doing that, considering Delaney Henderson, was assaulted and could have ended up like Audrey Pott. Any of these people could have ended up like Audrey Pott. And she turned it into something beautiful. I'm not discrediting the fact that Audrey Pot went through terrible things that she should not have had to go through. And at the end of the day, we can only handle as much as we can handle. And she handled what she could. And she's brave for that. She went to her breaking point. And I don't want that discredited. I just think that Delaney Henderson deciding to basically have to retell her story over and over again is also very courageous and very brave and very beautiful. What infuriates me the most about this case is the sheriff. And I kind of touched on this a little bit before. I don't think he works for Nottoway County anymore. I kind of hope he doesn't. At the time that this was filmed, this was made and released in 2016, I believe. Maybe filmed some in 2015 as well. He had middle school to high school aged daughters. But then he's sitting down for an interview about a case of two girls, around the same age as his daughters. And basically saying that he believes that this 14-year-old girl wanted this 17-year-old boy. And that she was at fault. And he doesn't say that explicitly. But when they ask him questions about like how this went down and how like she was a 14-year-old girl that said that she didn't want this to happen to her. And he's like, well, did she really not want it? Did she really not? And I think that's fucking horseshit. He needs to shut his fucking old mouth and sit down and fucking play Scrabble or some shit. Because clearly he should not be working in law enforcement if he's going to look at a 14-year-old girl and say that she wanted it. He's a hypocrite. Because I bet if anybody ever even tried to talk to his daughters, even if it was a nice boy trying to take one of his daughters out on a date somewhere, he would lose his shit and be one of those parents like cleaning their guns in the living room. Like he really gives that vibe. And it's toxic. It's basically saying, oh, well, nobody can touch my girls, but every other girl that deals with something like this, they asked for it. And you're a fucking asshole. And I hope he hears this. I hope him and anybody he knows hears me calling him a bitch. Because he is. The fact that you can look at a 14-year-old girl and see everything that she went through, see that she was basically frozen to the ground and left to die by boys that basically alcohol poisoned her and sexually assaulted her. And then you're going to say, oh, she wanted it? You're a fucking bitch. And I really, really could not describe it in a better way. You're an asshole. And I hope you lost your job. So this documentary is a lot to handle. I myself even, the second watch through, ended up watching it in 2 parts. You hear a lot from Daisy's brother as well. You hear a lot about Daisy's attempts to end her life and how they kept having to save her. And you hear a lot about all this terrible shit that this whole entire family, but of course, mostly Daisy, went through. And it really hits. I watched this documentary, like I said, probably in 2018 or 2019. And in 2020, Daisy Coleman took her own life. And I remember when I woke up and I saw that article, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I really looked up to her. You can still go online and find like her Instagram page and I believe other social media pages of hers. And you can see she was an incredible artist. She did tattoos. She was an incredible person. And to know that at the end of the day, everybody telling her that she wanted it and she was lying and all that, it finally got to her, like it really hurt because I looked up to her a lot for what she had gone through and how strong and resilient she was. And I had not watched the documentary since that happened in 2020 until I watched it to talk about it on this episode. And when I watched it the first time, at the end, you know, it says in honor of Audrie Pot and all others affected by sexual violence and all this stuff at the end. Like I said, I hadn't watched it since Daisy passed away in 2020. They added her name at the end of it in the memorial. And that was the first time throughout watching this entire documentary, I literally broke down in tears, to the point where I tried to record this after I finished watching it, like right after I finished watching it, and I could not do it. I was struggling so much because I was just like so, I don't even know what the word is, but just like so enthralled in, or not enthralled, because that's not the word. Taken aback, maybe. I don't even know what the right word would be. But it was just such an intense emotion. I couldn't talk about it. And do I recommend people watch this documentary? Absolutely. I think it shows that there's a big issue within law enforcement, that we should protect the boys and leave the girls to fend for themselves. And I think that needs to change. I mean, I can't remember his name, but there was the college athlete who sexually assaulted somebody on college campus. And his mom wrote a letter to the judge basically saying he knows what he did was wrong, but this is going to ruin the rest of his life if you send him to jail. And he ended up getting out early and basically had no repercussions for his actions. And it's insane. If you see all these other cases that we've talked about so far, you see a woman who got wrongly accused of murder and basically had her entire life destroyed because of it. But then you see someone who commits sexual assault and basically attempted murder, because you can say what you want about leaving somebody on the lawn like that, but that's attempted murder, hun. Like, it really is. And you can see that and you can say, oh, but she wanted it? Like, are you dumb? And we really need to do more to protect women and protect young girls. I'm not going to fully get into it, but like, the way that we talk about this shit is so insane. You look at people talking about the Epstein files, and they're talking about the literal children that are in these Epstein files and calling them young women. They're not young women. Young women is like early adulthood, like 20s. They're fucking girls. They're children. And you're trying to justify it by calling them women. That's not okay. And women do it too. Females do it too. So I'm not just saying it's a male-centered issue, because women have also kind of been, some women, I'm not saying all women, but some women have kind of been convinced that in a sexual assault situation, it is the woman's fault. And that's absolutely fucking abhorrent, and that's insane. We really, as a society, need to do better. But I don't think we're going to get there by having people like the Nottoway County Sheriff at the sheriff's desk. I don't think we're going to get there by having people like the President of the United States, who was in the Epstein files over 5,300 times and clearly did some shady shit with underage girls. Oh, that's what it is, because they call them underage women. There's no such thing as underage women. It's underage girls, not young girls. My bad. But he still gets to be president. You know, the guy still gets to be sheriff. This college rapist still gets to go on and live a full life, because it's what, you know, it's what he's owed. It's his rights, you know. And it's just so fucking sick. It makes me sick to my stomach. We really need to do better. And I didn't kind of want to get on the soapbox with this episode, but I think I kind of needed to kind of work through watching this again. But I'm going to stop there. I really do recommend that you watch this if this is something that you can handle. It's really difficult to handle, but if you can handle it, I think it's really worth the watch. Next week, we'll be starting another 3-piece We will be talking over the case of Amy Bradley, the girl who was lost at sea on a cruise ship and still hasn't been found. It's been like 25 years or something. They did a Netflix documentary about her last year, so we're going to be discussing that documentary starting in the next episode in 2 weeks. But let me know what you think about Audrie and Daisy. Let's start a dialogue, and maybe we can be better than the rest of society because we are willing to have an open conversation. Stay safe. Love you all.